This is the story of how a young Latino programmer, armed with nothing but his genius, walked into the lion's den of a tech giant. It's about how one moment of public humiliation sparked a silent, calculated war against a powerful CEO, proving that in the cold, hard world of Silicon Valley, the most dangerous battles aren't fought with fists, but with code. Leo Martinez, all of 20 years old, felt the weight of the world on his shoulders as he pushed the gourmet dash delivery cart across the marble floors of Ethelred Technologies. The air smelled of expensive coffee and quiet panic. On a massive wall screen, lines of red code bled like open wounds, and a huddle of exhausted-looking engineers were arguing in increasingly desperate tones. Leo was just supposed to drop off the lunch order and wait for a signature, but his eyes were glued to the screen. He wasn't a formally trained expert, but long nights spent devouring library textbooks and free online courses in his tiny apartment had given him a sharp, intuitive understanding of system architecture. The error was screaming at him, as obvious as a typo in a headline. They were using a nested loop to query a massive dataset, a rookie mistake, an algorithm so inefficient it was practically designed to self-destruct. "Excuse me," Leo heard himself say, his voice, a near whisper that somehow cut through the tension. You're using the wrong data structure. A hash map would solve that in milliseconds." Every head turned. The silence that followed was heavy with disbelief and a thick, syrupy contempt. The blonde receptionist snickered. "Right. The delivery kid knows about data structures. That's a new one." But a tall man in a perfectly tailored Italian suit, his salt and pepper hair flawlessly combed, detached himself from the group. This was Julian Croft, the legendary CEO of Ethelred. His eyes, sharp as surgical steel, scanned Leo's uniform from top to bottom. There was no anger in his gaze, just a cold, detached curiosity, like a biologist examining a strange new specimen. "Delivery kid," Croft said, his voice low and even. "Do you have any idea what this project is worth? How many PhDs from MIT have been working on this for the last 6 months?" Leo swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. "No, sir. But I know your system is crashing every time you get more than 500,000 concurrent users, and you're losing about $2 million a day in operational costs and lost opportunities." The faint, condescending smile on Croft's face froze. That number was strictly internal. He glided closer, the air around him seeming to grow colder. "And how would you know that—" Leo's mind raced. He couldn't say that his mother, Elena Martinez, had been cleaning these same offices for 15 years. He couldn't admit that he'd spent countless pre-dawn hours waiting for her shift to end, reading documents left on desks, absorbing the technical jargon from meetings overheard through half-closed doors. That would put her job on the line. "Just an observation," he lied. Croft stared at him for a long, unnerving moment. Then an unreadable smile touched his lips. "All right, genius, prove it." He gestured to an empty terminal. "You have 10 minutes. If you can improve performance by even 10%, I'll forget this little interruption ever happened." Leo took a deep breath and walked to the terminal. His fingers found the keyboard, and the world around him faded. He wasn't just fixing a bug. He was rewriting the core logic. He replaced the clumsy brute force loop with an elegant hash map, condensing hundreds of lines of code into a few dozen. 9 minutes later, he stepped back. "Done. Run the simulation." A nervous engineer initiated the test. The screen flickered. Numbers cascaded down like a waterfall. And then, total silence. The system had processed 5 million concurrent queries in under 3 seconds. 0 crashes. The room was stunned. Julian Croft looked from the screen to Leo, a flicker of genuine shock in his eyes that was quickly masked by cold calculation. He didn't get angry. He didn't humiliate Leo further. Instead, he did something no one expected. "What's your name, kid?" "Leo Martinez." "Leo Martinez," Croft repeated, as if tasting the name. "Your mother is Elena. Isn't she night crew sanitation?" The blood drained from Leo's face. "Don't worry. Croft said, that unnerving smile returning. "She's not fired. Instead, you've just earned yourself an opportunity. An internship, probationary, minimum wage. You start tomorrow, and you'll report directly to me." The offer hung in the air, a promise and a threat all at once. It wasn't an opportunity. It was a leash, a gilded cage, and Leo had just been handed the key, forced to lock himself inside. Julian Croft's offer hung in the air, a promise and a threat, wrapped in the same cold package. Facing the CEO's calculating gaze, Leo Martinez had no real choice. To refuse was to endanger his mother and slam shut the only door that had ever opened for him. To accept was to step into an unknown territory where he was the mouse in a predator's game. He had nodded his assent. Leo's first day at Ethelred felt like walking into a parallel reality. He was given an access card, a tiny desk in a loud open-plan office, and a list of tasks so menial they felt like a form of humiliation. He was assigned to debug decades-old code, to update the documentation for long-canceled projects, the digital grunt work no other engineer would touch. Julian Croft never spoke to him. It was as if the CEO had forgotten he existed, but Leo knew he was being watched. He could feel it in the way the other engineers would glance at him, before quickly looking away in the sudden silence that fell whenever he entered the break room. He was the delivery kid, an anomaly in the perfectly calibrated system, a pawn in the CEO's game. The only person who treated him with a remote professional courtesy was Dr. Evelyn Reed, a senior systems engineer with salt and pepper hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She didn't engage in the office gossip, simply nodding politely at Leo as she passed her focus absolute. She was an island of order in a sea of chaos. At the end of his second week, an email from Croft's office landed in his inbox. There was no greeting, just a single attached file, a hopelessly tangled piece of code, snarled with complex recursive algorithms. The subject line contained one word: optimize. It was an impossible task, a problem designed for failure. Leo spent the entire weekend sleepless, fueled by coffee and his old textbooks. He solved it, not with a single elegant solution, but through brute force intelligence, breaking the problem into 100 smaller pieces and tackling them one by one. On Monday morning, he sent back the optimized code, its performance boosted by 30%. There was no reply. Meanwhile, at home, his mother, Elena, grew more anxious by the day. "I don't trust him, Leo," she'd say, her hands twisting the fabric of her worn apron. "I've worked there for 15 years. I've seen good people, smart people get crushed. That place changes people, mijo. It takes the light from their eyes." One evening, while performing another of his tedious tasks, archiving old directories on a server about to be decommissioned, Leo stumbled upon something he shouldn't have. A folder buried deep in a protected partition, labeled Project Nightingale. Curiosity got the better of him. He clicked on it. Access denied. But a moment later, a red warning window flashed onto his screen. Security breach. User ID 734 LMA has been flagged. System administrator notified. 734 LMA. His ID. He frantically closed the window, his heart hammering against his ribs. He'd made a stupid amateur mistake. He'd walked right into a trap. He was sure he'd be fired by morning, and his mother along with him. But nothing happened. No email. No summons. The silence was more terrifying than any reprimand. He tried to focus on his work, but the feeling of being watched was now overwhelming. At the end of the day, as he was packing up to leave, Leo noticed a yellow sticky note placed discreetly under his keyboard. On it was a single line of neat handwritten script. "Don't look for the answer. Look for the right question." He looked up and saw the back of Dr. Reed as she walked down the hall, never once looking back. What was Project Nightingale so fiercely guarded it could get him fired? And was Dr. Reed's cryptic note a lifeline, or just another piece of the intricate trap he had just stumbled into? The silence lasted for 2 more days. 2 days of torment, where Leo checked his email compulsively and jumped at every footstep behind him. Dr. Reed's note sat in his pocket like a burning coal, a spark of hope, and a reminder of the danger he was in. He didn't know who to trust. Every prolonged glance in the hallway, every quiet conversation that stopped when he approached, felt like a judgment. He was walking a tightrope over a canyon, and Julian Croft was standing on the other side, holding a pair of scissors. Finally, on Wednesday afternoon, the summons came. CEO's office, immediately. When Leo walked in, Julian Croft was standing with his back to him, gazing out the panoramic window at the sprawling valley below. The vast office was silent, except for the low hum of the climate control system. "Mr. Martinez," Croft said without turning, "are you enjoying your time here?" "Yes, sir." Leo managed his voice barely a croak. "Good, because curiosity can end a career faster than incompetence." Croft turned his eyes as cold and empty as a winter sky. "Project Nightingale. What did you see?" The blood froze in Leo's veins. He thought of all the movies where the hero would deliver a clever, convincing lie. But looking into Croft's eyes, Leo knew it was pointless. Croft wasn't looking for a lie. He was enjoying Leo's fear. He decided to play the part of the naive intern who had wandered astray. I didn't mean to," he stammered. "I was looking for some old documentation, and I must have misclicked. It said access denied, so I closed it right away. I'm sorry." Croft stared at him, the silence stretching uncomfortably long. He seemed to be analyzing every breath, every blink. "A piece of advice, Martinez. At Ethelred, there are no misclicks. Stay in your lane. You've been warned." Leo left the office, a cold sweat breaking out on his neck. He had survived, but he knew it was just a warning. Croft was playing a game of cat and mouse, and Leo was the mouse. He realized he couldn't do this alone. He was being toyed with, manipulated by a master. He needed someone on the outside, someone who could look at Ethelred without being blinded by fear. He remembered a series of investigative articles on corporate misconduct in the tech industry, written by a journalist named Anya Sharma. Her work was sharp, well-researched, and relentless. Using a public computer at the local library, Leo sent an anonymous email to Anya's contact address, giving only vague details about a questionable internal project with harmful potential at a major tech corporation. He didn't dare mention Ethelred or Nightingale by name. He didn't really expect a response. It was an act of desperation. But a response came in a way he could never have anticipated. 2 nights later, while working a shift at Gourmet Dash, to make ends meet, a woman with intelligent eyes and sleek black hair walked in. She didn't order anything. She walked right up to the counter where Leo stood. "Leo Martinez." She asked, her voice both professional and direct. Leo gave a wary nod. "My name is Anya Sharma," she said, and Leo's heart stopped. "You're a hard man to find. I'm here about your anonymous email." She pulled out her phone and showed him a screen displaying a security alert. "The encryption protocol you used to send your email. It triggered one of my alerts. It's very similar to a proprietary protocol Ethelred uses for its internal surveillance. We need to talk, now." How was a journalist's system connected to Ethelred's internal surveillance? Was Anya Sharma truly an ally? Or was she just another layer of the system designed to identify and neutralize threats like Leo? They met at a small, out-of-the-way coffee shop, the air thick with the smell of roasted beans and mutual suspicion. Leo watched Anya trying to read her, while she regarded him with a calm, professional patience. "Look," Anya began, leaning forward and lowering her voice. "I don't work for Ethelred, if that's what you're thinking. I have a source, a former cybersecurity employee from another company that Ethelred acquired a few years back. He was fired after trying to blow the whistle on their corporate espionage practices. He's the one who gave me the intel on Croft's internal surveillance system, codenamed Prometheus. It doesn't just monitor employees. It actively scans for external threats, using certain keywords and behavioral patterns. Your email matched one of those patterns." The explanation was chillingly specific and logical. It showed Anya wasn't just guessing. She was an active investigator. Leo felt the wall of his own defense begin to crumble. He told her everything about fixing the algorithm. Croft's offer, the meaningless tasks, Project Nightingale, and Dr. Reed's cryptic sticky note. Anya listened intently, her fingers tapping silently on her laptop. Nightingale, she murmured, her eyes scanning her own vast encrypted archives. The name sounds familiar. She sifted through years of articles and documents. Here it is, she said, turning the screen toward Leo. Over the last 2 years, at least 5 small startups have been acquired by Ethelred. The common thread. They were all on the verge of a major breakthrough, but suddenly ran into mysterious financial problems right before Ethelred swooped in with a lowball offer. The picture was becoming bigger and darker than Leo had ever imagined. Nightingale wasn't just an internal project. It was a weapon. Back at Ethelred, Leo started seeing everything through a new lens. He was no longer just a frightened intern. He was a spy. He overheard a tense phone call through Julian Croft's slightly ajar office door. "I don't care what it costs," Croft snarled into the phone, his usual composure gone. "Find the leak. I want to know everything. The board is getting impatient." Leo realized that Croft wasn't an all-powerful king. He, too, had to answer to a higher power. This pressure seemed to be fueling his ruthlessness, making him more dangerous and unpredictable. Armed with the context from Anya, Leo began his own investigation, but smarter this time. He used public Wi-Fi web archives and public corporate filings. He discovered that Nightingale appeared to be a sophisticated AI algorithm designed to analyze the market, identify promising startups, and then find or create financial vulnerabilities to exploit. One evening late, when Leo was the last one left in the office, he found a small black USB drive sitting neatly on his desk. There was no note. He knew who it was from. He didn't dare plug it into a company machine. He took it home using his old personal laptop. The drive contained a single password-protected PDF file. He tried a few common passwords with no success. Then, he remembered Dr. Reed's note. Look for the right question. His heart pounding, he typed into the password field, "What is Nightingale?" The file opened. Inside was a 20-page legal document, heavily redacted. It was a settlement agreement for a wrongful death lawsuit filed against Ethelred 10 years prior. The plaintiff was the family of a young programmer named Ben Carter. A chill went down Leo's spine as he recognized the name. In an old article he'd read about Ethelred's early days, Ben Carter was mentioned as the co-founder and Julian Croft's best friend. Had Croft's ambition led to the death of his own best friend? And was Project Nightingale his way of covering up a guilty past? Or worse, a continuation of a ruthless legacy that had started years ago? The documents on the USB drive told a cold, tragic story. Ben Carter, the brilliant but trusting programmer who had built Ethelred from a garage startup with Julian Croft, had been systematically forced out of his own company through a series of legal and financial maneuvers. Betrayed, bankrupt, and broken, he had taken his own life. The subsequent lawsuit from his family had been quietly settled, burying the scandal and allowing Croft to build his empire on the ashes of that friendship. Project Nightingale wasn't just a corporate weapon. It was the ultimate expression of Croft's ruthless philosophy, where people were just variables in an equation of profit and loss. This discovery changed everything. This was no longer about corporate espionage. It had become personal, and it was dark. Leo, Anya, and Dr. Reed met in a secure safe house arranged by the journalist. The grief in Dr. Reed's eyes was raw as she spoke of Ben Carter, revealing that he had been her first mentor, the one who saw her potential and championed her career. Her resolve was now forged in steel. "We can't just leak this," Anya said, her voice a pragmatic anchor in a sea of emotion. "Croft will control the narrative. He'll paint a picture of Ben as unstable and himself as the tragic friend. With his army of lawyers and PR agents, we'd be crushed before the story even got traction." "She's right," Dr. Reed agreed, her voice firm. A frontal assault on Croft is like taking on a tank with a pocket knife. We can't win, but we can make it collapse on itself from the inside. And so a plan was born. Not a blitz attack, but a controlled demolition. Phase 1. Sowing doubt. They wouldn't lead with Nightingale or Ben Carter's death. Instead, they would anonymously leak proof of minor but undeniable financial misconduct, inflated contracts to shell companies' lavish personal expenses, billed to corporate accounts. The target was a specific board member, Marcus Thorne, an old-school investor known for his rigid, principled stance on corporate governance. The goal was to trigger an internal audit. Phase 2. Aiming the arrow. The audit would create chaos and distract Croft. During the confusion, Anya would use her channels to feed more information to Thorne about Nightingale's predatory nature, framing it not as a crime, but as a systemic risk to the shareholders. Phase 3. The psychological trap. They would corner Croft, forcing him to defend himself to his own board. They would use his paranoia and his aggressive temper as weapons against him. The plan was set in motion. Dr. Reed, using her access, copied the necessary financial records. Anya sent them in an untraceable envelope to Marcus Thorne's office. And just as they'd predicted, the fish took the bait. A few days later, whispers of a surprise internal audit began to circulate through Ethelred's upper management. Croft was furious. He saw it as a personal attack, a betrayal from within. A witch hunt began. Surveillance systems were ramped up to suffocating levels. And then, an email titled, "Regarding Corporate Loyalty," was sent to the entire company. In it, Croft announced a mandatory loyalty review for all employees involving cross-examinations and security interviews. The reviews would begin next week, and the first department named to be made an example of was none other than Systems Engineering, Dr. Evelyn Reed's department. Was their plan backfiring? Would their key ally be exposed before they could even begin Phase 2? And could she withstand Croft's ruthless scrutiny? The week leading up to the loyalty review was agonizing. Dr. Reed walked into the interrogation room with a calm, professional demeanor that betrayed none of the terror churning inside her. She answered every probing question from Croft's security team with flawless, detached precision. She was a fortress of composure, and she passed. But she knew, and the team knew, that they had just dodged a bullet. Croft's witch hunt was escalating. They were out of time. They immediately accelerated the plan. Anya Sharma published her first article. It wasn't a bombshell, but a masterful piece of strategic journalism. It didn't mention Nightingale or Ben Carter. Instead, it raised sharp questions about Ethelred's aggressive acquisition strategies, citing well-placed anonymous sources from the tech community who spoke of a pattern of predatory behavior. The article caused a stir online, and more importantly, sent a tremor of anxiety through Ethelred's board of directors. That tremor was all Marcus Thorne needed. Armed with the article and the preliminary yet troubling findings of his internal audit, the veteran board member called for an emergency meeting. He demanded that Julian Croft provide a full explanation. The stage was set. In the nights before the meeting, Leo worked feverishly with Dr. Reed. He poured all of his genius into creating their final weapon. It wasn't just a presentation of stolen data. It was a live simulation. Using his intimate knowledge of the company's systems, the very systems he had helped fix, he built a model that showed what would happen if Nightingale's parameters were ever turned inward. It was a digital doomsday machine, demonstrating how the algorithm would exploit Ethelred's own financial structures, triggering a catastrophic collapse. It proved that Nightingale wasn't just unethical, it was an existential threat to the company itself. In the sleek, top-floor boardroom, Julian Croft was in his element, confidently dismissing the allegations. The article was journalistic sensationalism. The audit, a paranoid overreach. He was in complete control. But Marcus Thorne was not intimidated. "Julian, this isn't about bad press," Thorne said, his voice cutting through the room. This is about a rogue algorithm you built a systemic risk to our shareholders. I want you to explain this risk model. He pushed a tablet across the polished table, the simulation loaded and ready. Run it, now. Croft's confident smirk vanished. This is absurd. A hypothetical fantasy. Then prove it's a fantasy. Thorne countered, his gaze unwavering. The rest of the board was silent, watching. Run the simulation. Cornered Croft stabbed at the screen with a furious finger. The simulation began to run on the massive wall display. Lines of data streamed, charts formed, and a terrifying trajectory emerged. Ethelred's stock price in the simulation went into a catastrophic freefall. Croft's face went ashen. The blood drained from it. But then he did something strange. He wasn't looking at the screen or the shocked faces of the board members. His eyes darted up, finding the small black security camera in the corner of the room. He stared directly into it, as if he could see Leo watching from the other side. And then he gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod, a silent acknowledgement from one chess player to another who had just called checkmate. The moment passed, and his expression hardened into one of pure, unadulterated fury. Just then, the boardroom doors swung open. But it wasn't federal agents or the police. It was the company's chief legal counsel, their faces grim. What did that chilling nod of respect mean? And why the lawyers instead of the police? Was this a corporate coup? Not a criminal takedown. The lawyers were not there to see justice done. They were there to contain the damage. The scene that followed was not a dramatic arrest, but a cold, quiet corporate execution. Faced with undeniable proof of a systemic risk that could lead to shareholder lawsuits worth billions, the board acted to protect the company, not to punish a man. In exchange for the board not pursuing criminal charges, Julian Croft signed his resignation, effective immediately. He signed away his shares, his golden parachute, and his legacy, all under the unblinking watch of the company's legal counsel. He wasn't led away in handcuffs. He simply walked out of the room, a ghost in his own empire erased from the company he built. It was a brutal, bloodless, and deeply corporate form of justice. In the weeks that followed, a new order began to take shape at Ethelred. Dr. Evelyn Reed was appointed the new Chief Technology Officer, tasked with the monumental job of cleaning house and rebuilding the company's ethical compass. And Leo Martinez, the boy who had walked in to deliver a lunch order, was offered a position no one could have imagined. He wasn't made CEO, that was the stuff of fantasy. He was given something more meaningful, the leadership of a newly created division for corporate ethics and algorithmic oversight, reporting directly to the board. He was given the power to ensure a nightmare like Nightingale could never happen again. 6 months later, Leo stood in his new spacious office, looking out at the valley. His mother Elena walked in, carrying a container with a homemade lunch, just as she used to bring him to the offices she cleaned. She was retired now, living comfortably. She placed the container on his large desk and smiled a real smile that reached her eyes. "I always knew you would do great things, mijo," she said softly. "I just never imagined it would be like this." It was a quiet victory, tasting not of revenge, but of a hard-won peace. As for Julian Croft, he became a pariah. Stripped of his power and reputation, he vanished from the corporate world. The last anyone heard, he was living in a minimalist apartment overseas, a ghost haunted by the memory of his own ambition. The fall wasn't loud or public. It was a quiet, complete internal collapse. This was never a story about a single hero taking down a single villain. It's a reminder that real lasting change doesn't always come with a loud bang, but often from quiet, persistent, intelligent work from within. Justice isn't always about seeing your enemy in chains. It's about having the strength and wisdom to build something better from the ashes of their failure. The true fight isn't just against one corrupt man, but against the system that allows men like him to thrive. Leo's victory wasn't in destroying Julian Croft. It was in fundamentally changing the rules of the game at Ethelred. If this story about the silent fight for justice resonated with you, Subscribe to the channel to discover more true stories of people who use their intelligence and courage to change the world, not with force, but by turning the enemy's own rules against them.